Hey community, today we are going to make a 14 bean soup. Normally my layers of jars are much prettier than this. This one has been shaken up a bit, but there are 14 different types of beans in there as well as some sea salt. So step number one, I have in my pot some oil and some garlic and some onions, and those are just sauteing. You'll notice inside of the jar that there's some salt granules in there, so I use the salt that's inside of the soup in order to season my onions and my garlic. Also, when you open it, there's a bay leaf inside of the jar, and that goes in as we saute as well. Because I'm not going to use any broth in my base, I am using mushrooms in order to create a natural vegetable broth and bring out some awesome flavors into this soup. So these are enoki mushrooms, and I've tossed those in as the onions are finishing their saute. And now I'm going to add in some baby bellas. And these baby bellas are going to saute with the others. And once these saute a bit, this is when I'm going to add my can of diced tomatoes once this sautés down. So we'll see that next. So there's two ways that you can do this. You can either use a can of diced tomatoes, or you can use 2 to 3 fresh tomatoes and dice those up and add them directly to the pot after the mushrooms, the onions, and the garlic have simmered down and cooked. So I'm just adding in my tomatoes now. Let's stir this in. Okay, so next up is going to be the water. We're going to want to add all of the water into, we're going to add 8 cups of water into this, and then we'll bring it to a boil. My 8 cups of water have been added, and I am waiting for it to come to a boil. We're at a rolling boil now inside of our pot, so we have the rest of the salt that's inside. So I have not tasted this, what I have inside of the pot yet, because I know that I still have to add all of that salt in there. So I'm going to put the beans in now. This whole jar of beans is going to go in. And then as I stir it, let me find my spoon here. I'm going to stir this, get all that salt in there nice and dissolved, mixed around. Now, from the beginning up until now, I have had my burner on high heat. Okay, so I've had it on pretty high. That looks like medium high, but for me, that's pretty high on my stove because my stove runs pretty hot. So I've had it on high heat pretty much the whole time, but now is when I'm going to turn it down. So I'm going to taste this. Try not to get any of my floating beans there. There we go. Let's try this. The saltiness is perfect. It's got some great flavor. I am loving this. So I'm going to see how it's already boiling again. So I'm going to cover that. Now I'm going to turn my burner onto low fire, and that is going to allow it to simmer, okay? And I also have my next thing that I'm getting ready for. So I have foil lined both of my pans, and I have peeled my butternut squash. So now I am going to cut open my butternut squash, cut it into cubes, and prepare it onto these to be roasted. And these are going to be added into the soup at the very, very end. I cut off both of the ends of the butternut squash, and then I will cut it in half and take the seeds out. Here is the inside of your butternut squash. Now I'm going to take a spoon, and I'm going to spoon out those seeds so it's nice and clean. Butternut squash in half. So I cut it in half, then I cut the halves in halves, and then I cube it up and throw it into a bowl. Basic seasonings are going to go onto the butternut squash in order to roast it. I'm going to toss it in some avocado oil, some Himalayan salt, and some fresh crushed black pepper. So all that is going to go onto that bowl. I'm going to toss it so that everything is nice and covered, and then I'm going to spread it out on this pan and that one. One important thing to note here is when you are laying out your butternut squash or any vegetable to be roasted, is you want to leave plenty of room in between the pieces so that the air can move around it and roast it evenly. You'll notice that every piece of butternut squash is nice and shiny with that oil, and we're going to put that. All right, we're gonna slide this right into our toaster oven here, and I'm going to set this at 425 degrees for 15 minutes. All right.